At 78 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of cruelty life could offer, but nothing prepared me for what my own son's bride would do to me on their wedding day. What she didn't realize was that banishing me to the kitchen would be the biggest mistake of her entitled life. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed down my navy dress one final time, standing in the church vestibule where 40 years of Sunday services had prepared me for this moment. Bruno, my youngest son at 32, fidgeted with his silver cufflinks while stealing nervous glances toward the sanctuary doors where 200 guests waited to witness his marriage to Delora. The morning light streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the marble floor where I had walked as a young bride myself so many decades ago. My late husband, Carlos, would have been so proud to see our boy looking so handsome in his charcoal grey suit, the same shade Carlos had worn to our own wedding in this very church. Bruno turned to me with those familiar brown eyes that reminded me so much of his father, reaching out to squeeze my weathered hands with his strong, steady grip. His voice cracked slightly with emotion as he whispered the words that made my heart swell with motherly pride and accomplishment. He called me by the special nickname he had used since childhood, telling me how grateful he was for everything I had done to make this day absolutely perfect for him and his bride. I thought about all the sleepless nights I had spent over the past 8 months, carefully coordinating every detail with vendors I had known for decades in this small town where my family had deep roots. The catering arrangements alone had required countless phone calls to secure the best local suppliers, drawing on relationships I had built over 50 years of community involvement. I had personally visited the florist 3 times to ensure the centerpieces would complement the church decorations, spent hours reviewing the photographer's portfolio to capture every precious moment, and even negotiated special pricing with the string quartet that would play during the ceremony. Every decision had been made with love and attention to detail that only a mother could provide for her child's most important day. Delora swept past us in her elaborate designer gown, the kind that probably cost more than most people made in several months, her train trailing behind her like a white silk river. She barely acknowledged my presence with the briefest of nods. Her perfectly applied makeup, unable to hide something cold and calculating that flickered in her green eyes when she looked at me. The feeling made my stomach tighten with unease, but I quickly pushed the uncomfortable sensation aside, telling myself I was simply imagining problems where none existed on such a joyous occasion. Bruno had met Delora during his final year of college, and their whirlwind romance had led to an engagement after just 18 months of dating. She came from a wealthy family in the city, her father owning several successful businesses that had provided her with a lifestyle of luxury and privilege that was foreign to our middle-class background. Throughout their engagement, I had tried repeatedly to build a warm relationship with my future daughter-in-law, inviting her for family dinners, sharing stories about Bruno's childhood, and offering to help with wedding preparations in any way I could. The wedding march began to play, filling the sanctuary with the traditional melody that had accompanied countless brides down this same aisle over the decades. As we processed slowly toward the altar, I felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes watching our every step, friends and family members who had traveled from near and far to celebrate this union. My own relatives filled the first 3 rows on the left side, faces beaming with joy and anticipation for the ceremony they had been looking forward to for months. Bruno's college friends sat together in the middle section, young men and women who had grown up alongside my son and shared countless memories with him over the years. Something nagged at the back of my mind as I noticed Delora whisper something sharp and urgent to her maid of honor, her head turning slightly in my direction while her lips moved in what appeared to be an irritated conversation. The maid of honor, a thin brunette named Patricia, who had barely spoken to me during the rehearsal dinner, nodded quickly and cast a strange look toward where I sat in the front row. Their exchange lasted only a few seconds, but the intensity of their whispered words and the way they both glanced at me created a knot of anxiety in my chest that I couldn't quite shake. The ceremony proceeded beautifully, with Pastor Williams delivering a heartfelt message about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage that would unite 2 families as one. Bruno's voice was strong and clear as he recited his vows, promising to love and cherish Delora through all of life's challenges and joys. When Delora spoke her vows in return, her words were perfectly rehearsed and delivered with theatrical precision, but somehow lacked the genuine warmth and emotion that should have accompanied such a profound moment. As the couple exchanged rings and sealed their union with a kiss, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers of celebration. Rice and flower petals filled the air as Bruno and Delora walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, their faces glowing with happiness and excitement for the reception that awaited them. I wiped away tears of joy and pride, thinking about how Carlos would have loved to walk his son down this aisle and dance with me at the reception afterward. The photographer captured every moment with professional skill, ensuring that these precious memories would be preserved for generations to come. But as guests began making their way toward the reception hall located just next door to the church, I noticed Delora breaking away from the receiving line with determined steps in my direction. Her smile seemed forced and artificial as she approached, and something in her posture suggested this conversation would not be the warm mother-daughter moment I had been hoping for throughout the entire engagement period. Delora intercepted me just outside the church doors, her wedding dress rustling against the stone steps as she positioned herself directly in my path with the calculated precision of someone executing a carefully planned maneuver. Her voice carried an artificial sweetness that made my skin crawl as she addressed me with false endearments, but her eyes remained cold and focused like a predator sizing up its prey. She told me there had been some kind of crisis with the catering staff in the reception hall kitchen, speaking in urgent tones that suggested immediate action was required to save the entire celebration from disaster. My stomach dropped as I began to understand what was really happening, the pieces of her plan falling into place with sickening clarity. This was not about any catering emergency or kitchen crisis that required my expertise to resolve. Delora was deliberately and systematically removing me from the main reception area, relegating me to the role of hired help rather than honored mother of the groom. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me momentarily speechless as I processed the calculated cruelty of her actions on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. Bruno was already being whisked away by the wedding photographer for formal portraits with the bridal party, his attention completely focused on posing for pictures and following the photographer's directions. He was too distracted by the excitement and chaos of the moment to notice his new wife's conversation with his mother, completely unaware that I was being systematically excluded from the celebration I had helped plan and finance. The timing of Delora's move was perfect, ensuring that my son would not witness her treatment of me or have the opportunity to intervene on my behalf. I asked for clarification about the supposed kitchen situation, keeping my voice steady and controlled despite the humiliation burning in my chest like acid. Delora's response revealed the true nature of her character as her mask began to slip, showing glimpses of the entitled, cruel person she had kept hidden throughout the engagement period. She spoke about my supposed expertise in handling such matters, her tone implying that kitchen work was somehow my natural domain and appropriate place within the wedding celebration hierarchy. The insult cut deeper than any physical wound could have, reducing 42 years of community involvement, successful child rearing, and respected membership in this town to nothing more than menial labor skills. Other wedding guests began to notice our conversation as Delora's voice carried across the church courtyard, their curious glances and whispered comments adding public embarrassment to my private humiliation. Several of my longtime friends looked confused and concerned as they observed the interaction, clearly sensing that something was terribly wrong but unsure how to intervene appropriately. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger as more people became aware of the situation, their stares making me feel exposed and vulnerable in a way I had never experienced before. The woman who had raised 3 successful children, volunteered countless hours for church committees, and earned the respect of an entire community was being treated like a servant in front of everyone who mattered to her. My first instinct was to fight back, to demand the respect and dignity I deserved as the mother of the groom and a contributing member of this celebration. But the last thing I wanted was to create a public scene that would overshadow Bruno's wedding day or cause lasting damage to his marriage before it had even begun. I had spent too many months planning this perfect celebration to let my own wounded pride ruin the memories my son would carry for the rest of his life. The internal struggle between self-respect and maternal love created a painful tension that made my chest tight and my breathing shallow as I weighed my limited options. With as much dignity as I could muster under the circumstances, I nodded my acceptance of Dolora's directive and began walking toward the reception hall kitchen. My steps felt heavy and defeated as I moved away from the celebration, but I maintained my composure and kept my head high, despite the crushing disappointment. Behind me, I could hear Dolora's satisfied laugh as she told her bridesmaids that some people simply did not understand their proper place in social hierarchies, her words carrying clearly across the courtyard for everyone to hear. The comment was designed to reinforce her dominance while further humiliating me in front of our guests, making it clear that she viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle to be managed rather than a family member to be respected. As I reached the kitchen entrance, I turned back briefly to see Delora holding court among her friends, her expression triumphant and self-satisfied as she basked in what she clearly considered a victory over someone she deemed beneath her station. The industrial kitchen felt cold and sterile compared to the warm celebration happening just beyond its walls, filled with stressed catering staff rushing to prepare the final courses for 200 hungry guests. I rolled up my sleeves and began organizing the chaos around me, but my mind was racing with thoughts of revenge and justice rather than focusing on the immediate tasks at hand. Delora had made a critical error in her assumptions about my capabilities and connections, underestimating the power I still wielded behind the scenes of this entire operation. Alone in the industrial kitchen, surrounded by dirty dishes and overwhelmed catering staff, I felt tears of rage and humiliation threatening to spill over as the sounds of celebration echoed from the reception hall beyond these sterile walls. This should have been the proudest moment of my entire life, standing beside my son as he began his new journey as a married man. Yet, instead, I found myself hidden away like some shameful family secret that needed to be kept from public view. The contrast between my current situation and where I should have been sitting at the head table felt like a knife twisting in my heart, each laugh and cheer from the party serving as a painful reminder of what had been stolen from me. I rolled up my sleeves and began organizing the chaos around me, my hands moving automatically through familiar motions while my mind raced with a mixture of hurt, anger, and something else that was slowly building inside me like a storm gathering strength. The catering staff looked at me with confusion and sympathy, clearly wondering why the mother of the groom was working in their kitchen instead of enjoying the celebration with her family and friends. Their whispered conversations and concerned glances only added to my embarrassment, but I maintained my composure and helped them arrange the dessert plates with the same attention to detail I had brought to every aspect of this wedding planning process. As I worked, memories flooded back of all the effort I had invested in making this day perfect for Bruno and his new bride. The countless hours spent researching vendors, comparing prices, and negotiating contracts had consumed my life for the better part of a year. I had used my decades of community connections to secure the best deals and ensure every detail met the highest standards, from the hand-selected flowers to the carefully chosen menu items that would please guests with diverse tastes and dietary requirements. Every decision had been made with love, and the desire to give my son the wedding of his dreams, regardless of the financial strain it placed on my fixed retirement income. Then I remembered something that made my heart skip a beat and brought a small smile to my lips despite the terrible circumstances. Delora had made a critical miscalculation in her cruel power play, one that revealed just how little she actually knew about my background and the connections I had maintained throughout my decades in this community. My late husband Carlos had been the original owner of this very venue 15 years ago, back when it was just a small banquet hall struggling to compete with larger establishments in the neighboring cities. We had poured our savings and countless hours of labor into renovating the space, transforming it into the elegant reception venue that now hosted some of the most prestigious events in the region. When we finally decided to sell the business due to Carlos's declining health, I had negotiated a very specific clause in the sales contract that most people would consider unusual, but that I had insisted upon for sentimental reasons. The clause granted me permanent oversight authority for any major events held at the venue, including the right to make executive decisions about bookings, catering arrangements, and even the authority to modify or cancel events if circumstances warranted such action. At the time, it had seemed like a romantic gesture to preserve some connection to the place where Carlos and I had built our dreams together, but now it represented something much more powerful. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my smartphone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Miguel Rodriguez, the current owner who had purchased the venue from us and had maintained a respectful friendship over the years. Miguel was a good man who valued the traditions and relationships that made his business successful, and I knew he would be horrified to learn about the way I was being treated at an event being held in his establishment. The irony of the situation was almost too perfect to believe. Delora had banished me to the kitchen of the very place where I still held significant legal authority and influence. Through the service window that connected the kitchen to the main reception hall, I could see my new daughter-in-law holding court at the head table, like some kind of social queen receiving tribute from her subjects. She was laughing with her bridesmaids and posing for photographs while Bruno looked around the room with an expression of growing concern and confusion. I could tell he was searching for me, probably wondering why his mother was not seated at the family table where she belonged and where every other wedding guest would expect to find her during this important celebration. The sight of my son's worried face as he scanned the crowd looking for his missing mother filled me with a renewed sense of determination and purpose. Bruno deserved better than this public humiliation of his family, and he certainly deserved to know the true character of the woman he had just married before their relationship progressed any further. Delora's actions today had revealed something fundamental about her personality and values that would likely cause problems in their marriage for years to come if left unaddressed. I dialed Miguel's number and waited as the phone rang, my heart pounding with anticipation and nervous energy as I prepared to set in motion events that would completely transform this wedding reception. Miguel answered on the third ring, his warm voice immediately recognizable as he greeted me with the respect and affection he had always shown. I explained the situation in carefully chosen words, describing the way I was being treated without letting my emotions overwhelm the facts of the case. Miguel's reaction was exactly what I had hoped for: immediate outrage and a firm commitment to take action to remedy the situation. He assured me that he could be at the venue within 20 minutes, and that he would bring the original sales contract with its specific clauses about my oversight authority. Miguel also mentioned that he had been concerned about some of the demands and attitude displayed by the bride during the pre-wedding planning meetings, but had not felt it was his place to comment on family dynamics. Now that he understood the full scope of the problem, he was prepared to exercise his authority as venue owner to ensure that proper respect was maintained for all parties involved in events held at his establishment. Bruno looked increasingly uncomfortable as his wife's speech continued, his expression showing growing awareness that something was fundamentally wrong with the tone and content of her remarks. Several other family members and guests began exchanging concerned glances and whispered comments as Delora's true personality became more apparent with each passing minute. Her mask of sweetness and charm was slipping away to reveal the calculating and self-centered person underneath, someone who viewed other people as obstacles to be managed rather than individuals deserving of respect and consideration. The moment I had been waiting for arrived when Delora made a particularly dismissive comment about people who failed to understand their proper place in social hierarchies, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for examples of such inferior individuals. Her words were clearly intended as a veiled reference to me and my banishment to the kitchen, designed to reinforce her dominance while publicly humiliating me in front of everyone who mattered to our family. The comment was delivered with such arrogance and cruelty that several guests visibly recoiled, their expressions showing shock and disapproval at her inappropriate behavior. Miguel caught my eye and nodded, understanding that this was the perfect moment to intervene before Delora could continue her verbal assault. He moved swiftly to the sound system controls and cut the microphone, bringing her speech to an abrupt halt that left the reception hall in stunned silence. Every head turned toward the entrance where Miguel and I stood together, our presence commanding immediate attention and respect from the assembled guests who recognized the gravity of the situation. Delora's face went through a rapid transformation from confusion to anger to outright fury as she realized that her carefully orchestrated performance had been interrupted by forces beyond her control. Her perfect composure cracked completely as she began shouting demands about her rights and her wedding, her voice becoming shrill and desperate as she sensed that her position of power was under serious threat. The contrast between her earlier sweet facade and her current display of rage was so stark that several guests began pulling out their phones to record the unfolding drama. Bruno looked between his new wife and his mother with growing horror as the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place in his mind. His expression showed the painful realization that he had been blind to his wife's true character and that his mother had been suffering in silence to protect his happiness. The weight of understanding settled on his shoulders like a heavy burden as he began to comprehend the full scope of what had been happening behind the scenes of his perfect wedding day. Miguel's voice boomed through the reception hall's sound system like thunder breaking through a peaceful afternoon, his authoritative announcement cutting through the celebratory atmosphere and bringing every conversation to an immediate halt. He apologized to the assembled guests for the interruption, while explaining that serious contractual violations had occurred that required immediate attention from all parties involved in the evening's celebration. The sudden silence that followed was so complete that you could hear the gentle clinking of wine glasses and the rustle of formal clothing as 200 people turned their attention toward the entrance where Miguel and I stood together, with official documents in hand. Dolores' carefully constructed facade crumbled before everyone's eyes as her face transformed through a spectrum of emotions ranging from confusion to rage to absolute fury. Her voice cracked as she screamed about her rights and her perfect wedding day, demanding to know how anyone dared to interrupt her moment of triumph and celebration. The contrast between her earlier sweet performance and this current display of entitled rage was so dramatic that several guests began reaching for their phones to capture the unfolding spectacle, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Bruno's expression showed the devastating realization dawning in his mind as he looked back and forth between his new wife's meltdown and his mother's dignified presence beside the venue owner. His face crumpled with the weight of understanding as puzzle pieces fell into place, revealing the true character of the woman he had just promised to spend his life with. The pain in his eyes was visible from across the room as he began to comprehend how badly he had failed to protect his mother from this public humiliation on what should have been one of the happiest days of both their lives. I walked slowly toward the center of the reception hall with measured steps that commanded respect and attention from every person present, feeling both terrified and empowered by the magnitude of what I was about to reveal. My voice remained steady and clear as I addressed our family and friends, explaining that I felt obligated to help them understand why the mother of the groom had spent the entire reception hidden away in the kitchen like hired help, rather than celebrating at the head table where she belonged. The gasps and murmurs that rippled through the crowd told me that most guests had been completely unaware of my absence until this moment. Miguel stepped forward to provide official context for my revelations, explaining to the stunned audience that I was not just another wedding guest, but actually retained legal oversight authority for all major events held at this venue. He described the contractual arrangements that had been established when my late husband and I sold the business 15 years earlier, arrangements that granted me specific rights and responsibilities that were being violated by the current situation. His words carried the weight of legal authority and business credibility that transformed my personal grievance into an official matter of contractual enforcement. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come, and I could see Dolores' face growing pale as she began to suspect that her carefully planned dominance strategy was about to backfire spectacularly. Miguel activated the venue's recording system and played back audio from earlier in the evening, capturing Dolores' cruel comments about people needing to know their place and her dismissive treatment of me as someone beneath her social status. Her own words echoed through the sound system with crystal clarity, providing undeniable evidence of her character and intentions that no amount of explanation or excuse could overcome. The recorded evidence included not just her public comments but also private conversations she had with her bridesmaids, discussions that revealed the calculated nature of her plan to humiliate me and establish her dominance over what she considered her new family hierarchy. Her voice could be heard making disparaging remarks about my background, my appearance, and my role in Bruno's life. Comments that showed a level of cruelty and entitlement that shocked even her own friends and family members who were hearing this side of her personality for the first time. As the recordings played, I watched Bruno's face transform from confusion to heartbreak to a kind of steely determination that reminded me powerfully of his father in moments of moral crisis. He stood up slowly from the head table, his wedding suit suddenly seeming like a costume for a role he no longer wanted to play, and began walking toward where I stood in the center of the room. Each step seemed to carry the weight of a decision that would reshape the rest of his life, and I could see the internal struggle playing out across his features as he processed the full scope of what his new wife had done. Dolores' desperation became more apparent as she realized that her position was becoming increasingly untenable with each passing moment. She began making wild accusations and threats, claiming that I was jealous of her youth and beauty and was trying to sabotage her marriage out of spite and resentment. Her words became increasingly irrational and vindictive as she lashed out at anyone within reach, including wedding guests who had done nothing wrong except witness her spectacular downfall from grace. The venue's security team appeared at Miguel's signal, their presence making it clear that this situation had moved beyond a simple family disagreement into the realm of event management and potential legal action. Several of Dolores' own relatives looked embarrassed and apologetic as they witnessed her behavior, clearly recognizing that her actions were indefensible regardless of whatever personal issues might have motivated them. The social dynamics in the room had shifted completely, with sympathy and support flowing toward me, while Dolores found herself increasingly isolated and exposed. Miguel announced that due to the serious nature of the contractual violations and the disrespectful treatment of protected parties, the reception would need to be temporarily suspended while official documentation was reviewed and appropriate remedial actions were determined. His words carried the weight of legal authority and business policy, making it clear that this was not a negotiable family dispute, but a serious matter requiring formal resolution. The guests began to murmur among themselves, uncertain whether they should remain or leave, while the wedding party stood frozen in various states of shock and disbelief. Bruno turned to face his new wife, with the expression of profound sadness mixed with steely resolve, his wedding suit somehow looking both formal and tragic as he prepared to make the most difficult decision of his young life. His voice was quiet, but carried perfectly across the silent reception hall as he told Dolores that their marriage was based on deception and cruelty, and that he could not and would not dishonor his mother and his family's values by remaining married to someone who treated the people he loved with such calculated malice and disrespect. The gasps and murmurs from the wedding guests created a sound like wind rustling through leaves as they processed the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Several people began quietly gathering their belongings, recognizing that this celebration had transformed into something else entirely and that their presence was no longer appropriate or welcome. Others remained frozen in their seats, transfixed by the drama unfolding before them, and uncertain whether they should intervene or simply observe in respectful silence. Dolores' final desperate attempt to maintain control involved appealing directly to Bruno's sense of obligation and public embarrassment, reminding him that they had just been married in front of all these people, and that ending their union now would create a scandal that would follow them both for years to come. Her words carried a manipulative quality that revealed yet another layer of her calculated approach to relationships, showing that even in defeat, she was still trying to use emotional leverage to achieve her goals. But Bruno had finally seen through her manipulation tactics and recognized them for what they truly were, tools of control rather than expressions of genuine love or concern. He removed his wedding ring with deliberate slowness, the gold band catching the reception hall's lights as he placed it carefully on the head table where it gleamed like a symbol of freedom rather than commitment. His action was witnessed by every person in the room and carried more weight than any words could have conveyed about his final decision regarding their marriage. Security personnel finally escorted a screaming Dolores from the venue as she continued making threats and promises of revenge that would echo in everyone's memory long after she disappeared through the exit doors. Her dramatic departure left behind a reception hall full of stunned guests, abandoned wedding decorations, and the lingering question of what would happen next to the family and relationships that had been forever changed by this evening's revelations. Miguel approached Bruno and me with genuine warmth and respect, announcing to the remaining guests that since the original celebration had been disrupted by unfortunate circumstances, he would be honored to host a different kind of gathering that would focus on celebrating the love and bond between mother and son that had proven stronger than any force trying to divide them. His generous offer transformed what could have been an ending into a new beginning, providing an opportunity for healing and renewed connection that would create better memories than the original wedding could ever have achieved. Bruno took my arm and led me to the head table where I belonged, his actions making it clear to everyone present that his loyalty lay with the woman who had raised him with love and sacrifice, rather than the one who had tried to manipulate and control him through cruelty and deception. The applause that followed was thunderous and heartfelt, coming from guests who understood they had witnessed something rare and precious: the triumph of authentic love over artificial manipulation, and the victory of dignity over cruelty in a world that often rewards the wrong values.